In Hugh Hewitt, MSNBC political analyst and the host of the one and only Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network. Good to see you, Hugh. There have been plenty of suspected leaks out of this White House before, but is this something new? Is this a different kind of leak, this kind of information? Wouldn't this have had to come from pretty darn high up in the transition structure?
Good to see you, Jacob. It would. I want to begin by saying I've been listening to a lot over the last 2 days. About half of what I've heard is the wildest hyperventilating speculation, always predicated by if true. And I would like to remind the audience of two things. One, back channels are not unique. They go back to an ABC News journalist, John Scali, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, sitting down with the head of the KGB at the Occidental Restaurant. They go to February of '91 with Henry Kissinger and Dobrynin. It goes actually to May of 2009 when President Obama and Secretary Clinton opened up a back channel with the mullahs of Iran through Oman that David Ignatius of the Washington Post has written about. Back channels are therefore not radioactive. What is the bombshell in the Washington Post report, and that we have to pay attention to, is the idea that anyone, but especially Jared Kushner, would want to use Russian comms to communicate. Now, I began my career in the Department of Justice as the counterintelligence special assistant, and that is so mind-bogglingly dumb that I can't credit it. I can't believe that anyone would say, let's use your stuff, if they knew anything about counterintelligence. So my line, Jacob, is that everyone's got to dial back the wildly speculative judgment of everything until and unless Robert Mueller steps up to the podium and says we have a real case of a real breakdown, including allegations that 18 USC 1001 have been broken by Jared Kushner on the SF-86. I just don't think we have a predicate for that.
Let me ask you the same question I asked Hugh, Congressman Rooney, and I'll use the dreaded if. Don't hate me. Yes. If this does prove to be true, Hugh, we're not talking about the same type, though, of back-channel communications as the Cuban Missile Crisis or the Iran nuclear deal. I mean, those were done by administrations, in the midst of making big deals or enormous moves with national security implications. We're talking about a transition, an incoming senior administration official who's not yet in the White House.
We are, and that's a huge distinction because they don't yet have clearances, if I understand it correctly, to conduct that kind of thing. However, it's all speculative, and we'd have to go back and look at transitions past and the degree of distrust between this incoming administration and the outgoing administration to get the appropriate context in which to assess this. But I do want to stress, Jacob, that we have real stories in the world. The Times of London today reports there are 23,000 jihadis in Great Britain, 3,000 of them actively involved. We had 3 terror attacks this week, one in the Philippines, one in Egypt, and, of course, the Manchester massacre. We've got extraordinarily successful trip by President Trump. I know that the lefties don't like me to say that, but the speech in Saudi Arabia was very successful. The visit to Israel was very successful. And by the way, the demand on our NATO allies to pony up 2%, while dismissed by some on the left, is not what Russia wanted President Trump to say. So I just think everyone's got to dial it back and wait for Mr. Mueller, and I hope the president comes up with an FBI director and moves forward expeditiously. As General McMaster said earlier today, I don't think it's right for the White House to comment on this story. I do think it's right for commentators to be cautious.
All right, Hugh Hewitt, I could talk to you all day, sir. Unfortunately, we've got to leave it there. MSNBC political analyst and host of the Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem